So, welcome back to the final session of GLOW 2020 that we've been running over the last 2 days. My name's Andrew Weeks. I'm a Professor of International Maternal Health here at University of Liverpool, and I've been Chair of the Local Planning Committee. So, as you know, we've had to convert fairly rapidly to an online format, and we thought that to finish off the programme today, you might find it interesting to hear about some of the mechanics that have gone on behind the scenes. There's a lot of people who are planning conferences. I was planned to go to many conferences this autumn, and they've all been abandoned. Some have converted to an online format, some have not, some have continued and postponed and postponed. And so we thought it might be interesting to show you a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes so we can share some of our experiences with you. So to do that, I've got Matt Sales with me, who led the production team here. He's lead project manager at SFL Events Production Team. I've also got online, I hope, Chris Woodhouse. Now, Chris Woodhouse is an IT expert who facilitates another online, hello Chris, who facilitates another online maternity conference, which is the Virtual International Day of the Midwife. And that's been running since 2009, so it's a well-established conference, and they run a 24-hour online conference format using a slightly different system. And so we thought it'd be interesting to share with Chris and to hear about what he does. Then also we've got Milton Musaba. Milton Musaba is an obstetrician gynecologist in Mbale in Uganda. He's a clinical academic, currently doing a PhD with Bergen University in Norway on the use of bicarbonate to reduce acidosis in women in obstructed labour, and has just completed a huge randomised trial there. So he's Senior Lecturer in Obstetrics and Gynecology at Busutema, and welcome to you, Milton. Thank you for joining us. To give her the perspective of somebody who we were sort of hoping to reach. We were hoping that by doing this online format, we could perhaps reach parts that other conferences cannot reach. So, let's call on Matt first of all. Matt, I wonder if you can take us through some of the mechanics of running an online conference. What's happened over the last few days? And can I ask you online, those of you listening, whilst he talks, can you text in your experience? Now, there'll be a formal evaluation that comes out, and so that'll be a little bit separate, but tell us, what's been good? What have you liked about it? What hasn't worked? What would you change in the future? Add it to the screen, and then we'll come to that as we go through the conference, as we go through the final bit. There should be, if I'm right, either up there, a place where you can write your comments, or it might be down there. But write in your comments so we can have a look as we go along. So, Matt, over to you first.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to start by thinking, why do we even come to a conference? I don't know about you, maybe you're here to learn something. Maybe you're here to hear some amazing speakers or some fellow researchers. Maybe you're here to meet people, or maybe your employer or employing organisation has paid you and told you to come. But we're here and we go to conferences. So this was planned. The team here were planning to do a great conference, now obviously live in Liverpool, but of course COVID came and that's not to be. So I met the team, Andrew and the rest of the planning group here, in about March on Zoom. This week was the first time we'd met in person due to lockdown and other things. So we met in March and started to think, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to do? And therefore, what's the mission we're trying to, and the message we're trying to share? So we started looking at people from all around the world. Actually, if you were coming right now to Liverpool, you'd need to travel, pay for a hotel, food, car parking, childcare, all these things. But actually, by being online, this has now got a global reach. As we've heard all day, there's over 1,300 people registered, 69 countries, and we've got a little map here just to show countries all around the world that people have come from. And it's amazing to see the reach that we've been able to get, that most people, probably you wouldn't have flown here. But not even people watching. I think the wider, having watched the Wendy Graham panel a couple of hours ago, the reach of the clinical care that we've been able to, the speciality, the speakers who can come here, who we wouldn't have been able to have, because the budget wouldn't have stretched to flying all of these people. So the ability to get great content and speakers and people to connect with who are doing very similar projects anywhere around the world. So that's where we started, is what do we want to achieve? And Andrew and the team have a great start. So we looked at the programme, and one of the key messages that I was sharing from the start is digital minutes aren't the same as real minutes. And that was one of our real focuses. You can't just sit and think, I'm going to do an hour keynote, I'm going to do this. Because actually, when I'm sat in my office at home watching the stream, there's too many distractions. I might get up and make a cup of tea. I do all these things, my emails come in. In a conference room, most people sit there politely and watch the session. So you're actually limited on how long the sessions can be. So we've tried to break sessions up with videos, to put breaks in, and maybe some of them feel a bit unnatural, but it gives people a chance to read your emails and do other things, to then come back to the session and then really engage during the content. Because it's all about the engagement, asking the Q&A questions, writing in the chat, looking at some of the polling. How do we really go, actually, if I'm here when this starts at 11, I get to ask this person speaking, maybe it was Annie Portillo yesterday, or Wendy today, or many of the other speakers, questions around actually, oh, you care about my question, and now you're talking to me. And that's really one of the focuses we've really pushed for. So what have we done here? We've come to Liverpool, and we've taken some lovely meeting rooms in this space, and we've built a couple of mini studio spaces. Again, none of this is particularly challenging, some small camera setups, lighting. It looks a little set, just to make it as beautiful as we can for the stream. Again, nothing too difficult. And then we rely on something that is very unreliable called the internet. And that's the factor we can't control. What's coming into here, in the building here, is fantastic internet. It's very fast. We've not had any dropout at all here. But around the rest of the world is hard to tell. Some of our friends who've been speaking from Uganda and India and other places, it's like you're on the end of a piece of string. And unfortunately, that's out of our control. So we need to think a lot about that as we're planning this event. A lot of the main sessions, there's been some pre-recorded bits. Kathy, this morning, we just wanted to make sure, are we going to get every word? Because Kathy's presentation was amazing. We want to hear everything of it. So let's take a pre-recorded video to make sure we can get all of it. But, as you saw, we've tried to take questions, the Q&A, wherever possible, live. And yes, maybe it's dropped out a few words, but that's mainly been out of our control. That is the power of the internet. So the key thing is internet, and then where can people watch it from? But also one of the other challenges, different countries have different internet rules. If there were people trying to watch from parts of Asia, maybe actually your internet there won't let you watch certain websites. So there's lots of things. So generally here, we've got a team. We've got the team with the videos and the PowerPoint, the camera team and the sound team, and they've been putting this together in a stream, working with the teams. And yes, we've had some challenges. Yes, we couldn't get Annie for a bit, so we moved the program around. But we have to be nimble and flex and go, okay, we're going to move the program, but Annie's like, but if you would go now and look at any of yesterday's sessions, they're there available for you, and they're there for the next 12 months for you to watch. So the chance to do that, to scan the, 150 posters and look at the abstracts and actually understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting talking with Annie yesterday. Annie Portillo was one of our keynote speakers yesterday morning. And interesting, we'd checked the link, and then actually she moved place and went to what seemed to be a brilliant Wi-Fi link place at WHO. But there seemed to be some kind of a firewall which we couldn't get around.
We've tested every speaker we can, but of course, these things are always going to change. Things are going to change differently. Yep. People have moved locations. Some of the talks today, someone was sitting in a room where the sunlight's changed, so she looks different in the thing. And we can only plan so much of this. But also, we're in a world where we've watched TV with Zoom lately. We've been watching Have I Got News For You, or the briefings for COVID. They've all had Zoom or web-based platforms. So everybody's used to this. Yes, some of the panellists have been breaking up, but we're getting more used to that.
And what's interesting is that with 1,300 people registered, actually, when you're looking at who's watching live, actually there's a difference, isn't there? There's been about 100 people watching live at any one time, but when you look back on yesterday's videos, there's been about 1,000 people who have viewed them. So it's interesting, isn't it? And I would be fascinated to go behind that camera there and go into people's living rooms and say, now what are they doing? Are they checking their emails? Are they working and it's just up in the background? Because I suspect most of us, when we're doing conferences from home, aren't just sitting there and watching. You think, oh, well, I'll take the opportunity just to do this and checking what else is going on. And so you don't get that same full attention, do you?
But I think it's the same at home. I don't watch live TV very much. Most of the time, you sit and you pick something up on Netflix, or you watch something on iPlayer or whichever platform. And so the culture that says we sit there and at a certain time we watch something, I don't think that's a real thing as much anymore.
No, indeed. Yeah. So I want to bring in Chris. Now, Chris Woodhouse, you've been running the virtual International Day of the Midwife now. I don't know how long the conference itself has been going on for over 10 years. But how do you do it? What tips would you have for us? Because you've been following this and sharing tips with us, and thank you very much for the input you've given us. How do you do it differently?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very good connection,
Yeah,
thanks.
good. I think it's practice and giving ourselves plenty of preparation time. That's the key thing. So we're already just planning our first meeting for next May's conference. So that it's long lead times, plenty of time to practice, I think, is the main thing. And you need to think about contingencies for what could go wrong in an online environment. As Matt was just saying, all sorts of things can happen. You can have fractured connections. You can lose someone, as you lost a speaker yesterday. Our tip for that is we actually plan a number of backup presentations. So we have a small number of people who do a wonderful thing. They volunteer to write and prepare and practice a presentation, which they might not deliver. And they're ready on standby in case we can't get through.
Yeah. Well, I think some of our best presentations, actually, we tried. Our plan was originally to have a backup video for everybody, especially for those from potentially difficult internet settings, which is why Kathy Burgoyne, who was phoning in from Uganda, sent us a video to start with. In fact, we thought that Geneva was going to be fine, didn't we? But it just shows you actually need to do it, because you're never quite sure what's going to disrupt the process and what's going to cause problems. It may be internet strength, and in other places it may be firewalls.
But I think that has quite an impact on the speaker, because if I was coming to present for a 45-minute keynote, do I really want to record it in advance and then present it again? And that's also a challenge. How do we make sure that we've got a decent backup, but actually maybe what's better is the backup? Did they present it better at the backup? And all of those kind of things. How do their slides work? It's quite challenging to some of the bigger speakers when they've got a longer period of time to make sure it's all ready to go.
But it's funny, because one of the beauties of a conference like this is that we've been able to get in. We've got a phrase in the UK which is boxing above your weight, and actually for a relatively small conference we've been able to get some of the top speakers in the world, and that's been fantastic. We've really enjoyed that opportunity. But actually, these are people who are going from conference to conference, from webinar to webinar, and everybody wants. I think of the two, Ambrose Talisuna and Raji Tajuddin, yesterday from high up in the Africa CDC and WHO, who we wouldn't normally be able to get to spend 2 or 3 days. Well, I mean, of course, the expense would be enormous to bring them over, but actually to be able to link in, but then to ask them to do a half an hour pre-recorded video is quite a big ask, because we're not quite used to doing that yet. There's a few of them, and they're not terribly easy to do.
But I think because people are not travelling right now, actually people have got time. So people are much more prepared to do things, because people still have great research to share.
Yeah.
So there is the whole world of research still to share. And as we move forwards, and we'll become into hybrid world at some point when the COVID starts to calm down a little bit. And as we move into hybrid, which means some people will be in the room, this is not going to change. We're not going to be in a place where we're going to fly everybody again, because the climate impact. As we move forward, for me, I want to think, what are we doing for my kids and my grandkids in the future to help with the environment? Or how does this fund itself? Because actually, we've not paid for speakers here in the same way that you would if we'd flown them and all these costs. So actually, the technology costs, it kind of levels itself out. And then other people, the different input, as you said, with the sponsors for this event. This means it's a free event, more people. I'm sure there are more people in parts of Uganda and India who wouldn't have watched this if they'd had to pay for it. And so being able to share some of this research is fantastic.
Yeah. Let's hear from Milton Musaba. Milton, are you there in Mbali, in Uganda? How easy has it been accessing this conference? Do you think you've been able to reach the parts that other conferences haven't reached?
The last 2 days have been a wonderful experience, especially with regards to the convenience associated with this kind of arrangement. I have not had any hassle of having to look for a visa, look for funding, to go for the conference, and I can come in, participate in a session that I'm interested in, and then get out to continue with the rest of the work that I'm involved in. So the convenience has been a plus for me in this whole session. Of course, there are the challenges of internet here and there, but it seems to vary depending on where you are and what time of the day. But it's good enough. I particularly liked the pre-recorded video of Kathy. I think it was very clear and it was very innovative to have that pre-recorded. I'm sure she would have had the same clarity if she was doing it live.
I think that's true, and of course the pre-recorded does give you absolutely perfect quality because we're doing it from here rather than taking the possibilities from of what it might be from Uganda. Milton, it'll be fascinating in time looking at the Google Analytics to see actually where we've done this or who we've been able to connect with. One of the things when we first set out doing this, we thought, okay, well, a lot of people don't have laptops, but there is a lot of phone use in sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. So actually getting it of quality on your phone is going to be really important. And we set out with that distinct aim of reaching people who wouldn't otherwise been able to. But maybe that was a little bit hopeful. Do you know of many people in Uganda, of your colleagues who have accessed it or been able to connect to it?
Yes, I have in Mbale here. I've known about 6 or 7 people who have been attending this conference, especially down at Safri. And outside that, actually, I'm also connecting through my mobile phone. I'm using it to do that my computer. So it does work.
So sorry, Milton, I know that Apple phones aren't very common in Uganda, are they? Most people have Android, don't they, or Samsung, is that right?
Yes.
So you've all been... So many people have been using the Android app, is that right?
Yes, you're right, Android app.
So do you think it was worthwhile? I mean, it took quite a lot of extra difficulty actually producing it as an app for the phone. That wasn't the easiest thing that we did, and we were wondering actually maybe we shouldn't have done that after all. Do you think that was worth doing?
Yes, Andrew, the app came in very handy. The only challenge with the app that I noted, and I've heard this from other people, is that it was quite difficult to navigate through the app, especially moving the agenda, moving from one session to the other. But it did help a lot, and especially the way it was organized.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Andrew, I love the way that Milton was just talking about 6 people that he knows of who were able to come to this just because it's online. Yes. They wouldn't have ever flown here and got visas to come because the hospital they're involved with wouldn't be able to fund that. And maybe one of them could come to a conference every 5 years, depending, or they'd wait for a speaker to come to a country somewhere near them. Yeah. But that's a way to share some of this research in a way that probably this research doesn't get shared.
Yeah. I'm just looking through some of the comments on, and actually this has been a nice part of this, is having the comments online and looking at what people are saying. I mean, it's interesting about the funding of it because I guess that the virtual International Day of the Midwife is run by volunteers, and in a sense that had been the same for us, but I guess as a local planning team, we just didn't have the expertise, and actually we were worried that everything would go very pear-shaped if we tried it that way. And we were very lucky, actually, that we were going to originally have a company in to do the production of it. And what we did then after that, we realised that it was going to cost us around about £20,000, that sort of figure. And if we were going to do that, we were going to have to charge everybody to come. And that was the model we set out with. And we were very lucky that the MRC and the Wellcome Trust stepped in to say, OK, let's make this free for all the different people. And not only for those attending in live, those attending here and now, but actually to put it, and it's going to be available for the next year on the internet. So people would still need to register, but it means you can flick in at any point and then revisit all these old these presentations. After the year, we'll put it on a Glow YouTube channel. So I think that the thought was that actually this was worth investing in as an educational resource for the future. So we've talked about all the benefits that we've got. Matt, what would you improve next time? What do you think you've learned from this session over the last 2 days? And how do you think we would change it if we could improve it?
I think Chris mentions a very interesting point around how do we actually plan better in preparation of content. I think the hardest thing has actually been we have so many people submitting abstracts and posters, and because we're trying to get pre-recorded, but actually people's diaries are busy. So the planning of how do we get all the content in the right place at the right time, that's been a challenge. And I think there are some ways we can do that better. And we need to work on that kind of thing. But I don't think there's very much more we can do about some of the guest speakers or any of the connectivity. That's at the whim of the internet. But I think most of the rest of it, people are commenting. I've read some of the comments. Maybe the PowerPoints are a bit small. It's quite difficult. Some of the slides have got a lot of content on them. Some of them have got a lot of content, or the posters especially, because the poster, if we printed them, they're A1 posters. They'd be great. So trying to suddenly read an A1 poster, we're looking at something the size of this television that you want to try and look on your phone. And how do we get the quality, especially when people are sending them from the world in different ways. So we've had some struggles, and we're happy to admit that. But I think the ability of people to connect has been incredible.
Thank you. And Chris, from your perspective, you've been a sort of an end user as well, an expert end user, shall we say. How have things gone for you? What do you think, as an expert user, what would you advise us in the future?
I think the overall appearance is really smart and slick. I do like the general look and feel of it, but I think the app and the web platform both were a bit clunky to use. There were some teething errors, and some bits didn't point where they should have done, and some of the messaging didn't quite work. So although the general stuff is really nice and accessible, and it works really well for the way you've had a mix of presenters and presentation styles, I think a bit more time in specifying and planning the access methods would stand you in good stead.
Yeah. And I guess these are things which, once you've... This is our first time running it online, and with time we'll get quite used to it. And it was interesting because actually we only got access to the final website and apps a couple of days ago, and suddenly we didn't have. We were playing catch up, trying to get it all correct and prepared in time for the conference. And so, actually, had we been, I guess, 2 weeks ahead of that, something like that, then actually we would have had the time to sort out those glitches and to test it all and to retest it and test it. Whereas some of those glitches you see are probably relatively straightforward to sort out if we had time. And of course, we'll know better next year. Experience and retrospect is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And Milton, from your perspective in Uganda, if you were to change things next year, if you were to give us some advice for the future, what would you suggest?
Thank you. So one of the things that has been new in this kind of arrangement is that there are distractions from the daily routines that we are involved in, and the lack of networking. And I would suggest that probably in the future, we could have some kind of maybe satellite mini conferences all over the place, where, for example, if we are in Mbale here, or Uganda, to make it bigger, there would be a particular place where people from within Uganda who would wish to attend the GLOW conference can congregate somewhere, and they have a good internet link, and those who want to concentrate can sit there and attend the conference in one place, as opposed to having to jump off from your duty station to sneak into and listen to one thing and go away. It takes away the bit of networking and the distraction. Sometimes the schedule has changed and you're not aware.
Do you think that many people will go on to use this as a future resource? Can you see people, because presumably if you're I don't know, maybe on leave and you're in a place with poor connectivity, or the network's down regionally, which isn't unusual, presumably you may not be able to access it then, but do you think many people will go, okay, I know where there's good network, let me go and watch a particular lecture the day after tomorrow, I'll book myself in because I know that I can connect it. Do you think there'll be much of that, or will people move on? Because life is busy, isn't it? We don't always get the chance to do all the educational things that we'd like to.
I think that was, and moving forward, I think this is going to be the new normal, that most conferences are going to be online, but that is what many people have been doing around here. So, for example, if you're within Mbale here, each office has got a good internet connection. So people have actually been moving from place to place to find a good connection to be able to connect. So it is something that would help, I would imagine.
Well, one sort of plan we had, which actually we never put into, we never actually ran with, was to run like a sort of a mini conference in different places around the world, so that actually you'd sit with a screen similar to this sort of size, and you would then play it for the population who were there, and so that you would in real time, like a conference, and it would be exactly as it would be a real conference, but maybe some of the sessions which weren't relevant would be taken out, and you'd have local speakers. You could charge a small amount, which would pay for the television screen rental and for the IT and for the facilities and some food. Do you think that could work?
Yes, I think that is something that could work. And that's what I was trying to suggest by saying probably in the future having something like satellite mini conferences. They would promote networking and minimize on the number of distractions that our people are faced with. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I'm just having a look through to see what all the other comments are online, it's worth having a look through and going through it. I mean, people were saying that slides are difficult to read on their phone, and I accept that. It's very difficult I guess as somebody writing a poster, as Chris was saying, as Matt was saying earlier, it's very difficult to get a huge poster and shrink it down, and then to put it on a phone is extremely difficult. But it looks as if there's a lot of enthusiasm, at least for the idea of moving forward. Somebody said it's interesting that it's a women's research society, and actually all four panelists are women, are not women. None of us are women, and apologies for that. I don't know. I would have to look through and see what the mix is over the day. We've tried to be inclusive, but we'll add that into our review to try and make sure that the panels are more inclusive. So I think it's time for us to close. Let me move up to the lectern here.